related to smart tourism and SDGs. So this is the first session of the day and day 2. Thank you and welcome again, once again, everybody. So before we start the session, there's a quick guidelines for all the participants here. Make sure you are on time. Definitely you are. We are already crossed the time. Be presentable, be prepared, and be chat responsibly. Be respectful to the others and try to minimize distractions. And if you have any issues, anything, you can communicate with us via the chat. For our Q&A session, as we did yesterday for the day 1, we will be taking your questions through Slido. So I highly encourage all of you to put your questions through Slido. You can scan this QR code. And if you have questions for the speaker, please make sure you name the speaker who the questions you are meant, and then you can ask your question. So we hope you'll get your questions from you for this session. Now, let me introduce the moderator for this session. It's none other from our Taylor's University, Malaysia, Dr. Ansul Garg. He will be moderating this entire session, and I hope you will have a great session for the day 2. So over to you, Dr. Anshul. Please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rupam. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, from wherever you are joining. Welcome to session 4 of Second Fritz Summer School on Innovation and Technology in Tourism to Achieve SDGs. The theme of session 4 is Smart Tourism and SDGs. In this session, 3 speakers will share their knowledge on smart tourism and SDGs. We have Professor Dr. Ulrike Gretzel, Professor Dr. Peter O'Connor, and Professor Dr. Juho Pesonen. The first speaker for today is Professor Dr. Ulrike Gretzel. Professor Dr. Ulrike Gretzel is a senior fellow at the Center for Public Relations, University of Southern California. She received her PhD in communications from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Her research spans the design, use, and implications of emerging technologies, ranging from mobile applications to smart destinations, robots, and the metaverse. She has over 20 years of experience conducting academic and practice-focused studies that have been funded by research funding agencies, destinations, governments, and major industry players like TripAdvisor. Dr. Gretzel is a fellow of the International Academy for the Study of Tourism and is frequently acknowledged as one of the most cited tourism scholars. So with this, I pass the floor to Professor Dr. Ulrike Gretzel. Professor, the floor is yours.
Here you go. Thank you so much. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. So let me share my screen here. It is a pleasure to present to you today, and I'm trying to see how I can do this. My computer is a little slow. If you could just give me a thumbs up for the slides.
Yes,
all good.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone to this session. And as you can see, I have a little cat here joining us as well. He's very obsessed with Zoom meetings, so he's going to learn about smart tourism as well here. I'm going to talk about smart tourism as a sustainable development paradigm, and you will see that I will have some questions about that and some suggestions, and also I think some agenda items for us as a research community to address in this context. So thank you, first of all, for having me. I'm also happy to be affiliated with Taylor University, and I'm going to present a little bit about some of the thoughts I've had about smart tourism over the years, but then also looking into the future, especially coming out of the pandemic and having to deal with tourism recovery globally. I think it's really important to think about smart tourism and think about it in a way that maybe is different from how we have conceptualized smart tourism in the past. So just to begin with, this is a summer school, so we're all here to learn, and I would like you to kind of remind yourselves of what smart tourism really stands for. Because also over the years of this being a topic in tourism, there have been different kinds of streams of literature as well as different applications in practice. So in 2015, we defined smart tourism as really an integrated effort at a destination. So it's not one business doing something related to a mobile app. And it's really about collecting and aggregating or harnessing data. And that data in smart tourism comes from different sources. So it comes from physical infrastructure, it comes from social connections, it comes from other data sources, and it can even come from human bodies, from tourists themselves as they're being tracked. Now, in addition to that, smart tourism then uses advanced technologies to transform that data. And it transforms the data into meaningful, enhanced experiences, but also innovative business value propositions. So there's a lot of emphasis on value creation, value co-creation, and ultimately that enhanced tourism experience. But the first two, I think, have been addressed very well by tourism research. But the third point here is that smart tourism from the very beginning has also always been about not only efficiency, but also sustainability. And that means including quality of life and well-being and equality issues in that. So in practice, though, it has been translated mostly into 4 pillars, so to speak. So here you have the European Union definition of the smart tourism capital, they call it, or smart tourism destination. So they focus on accessibility, sustainability, digitalization, and cultural heritage and creativity. And you see here that sustainability very much about natural resources, and accessibility very much about disability rather than more globally about mobility. So very narrow, very practical, very instrumental definitions to implement smart tourism in practice. Now, let me tell you about my issues with these existing definitions and these existing efforts, especially on the practice side in the industry. There has been a huge bias in smart tourism in terms of a focus on experience. So most of the smart tourism efforts that have been materialized have really looked at how can we maybe get information to tourists, how can we enhance their experience in a technological, in a mediated way. But smart tourism experiences are really just the tip of the iceberg. So you could call this the iceberg model, I guess, of smart tourism, where experience sits on top there, and everything, of course, aims at creating these meaningful, enhanced experiences. But there is much more going on beneath the waterline here in terms of the physical layer merging with the technological layer to creating digital spaces that really create as well as harness that data. That data is agglomerated, it's governed, and then hopefully translated into business applications. There's also a technology bias in this model, and not just focus on technology, but also technology that is mostly applications. So not so much the infrastructure that has been built, but really these end user technology applications. What we have found in our research is that resulting from this technology bias is really these disengaging techtopias that are being put forward as roadmaps for smart tourism development. And unfortunately, they really don't engage tourism stakeholders. If you look at this map, there's a lot of technology. There's a tourist here and there, but there's really not a lot of people in these maps. So really a technology-focused agenda that has been pushed forward. In terms of sustainability, as I already hinted at, there's a bias in terms of just focusing on environmental sustainability and even more specifically, energy efficiency. What really hasn't been done is thinking about a quadruple bottom line of smart tourism. And we really need to think about profit. We need to think about the planet, people, purpose in a different way in this context. So what kinds of employment is the smart tourism going to create? How is it going to protect animals and plants and natural attractions and help us deal with weather patterns and climate and maybe even noise and light pollution? But also socially, how is it going to maybe help us deal with human trafficking or crime or poverty? And culturally, how is it going to help us conserve maybe cultural knowledge instead of leading to cultural loss? There's also an inherent urban bias in the smart tourism literature and practice. And that is because it kind of evolved out of the smart city movement. But really what we need for smart tourism as a sustainable development paradigm is a rural and regional smart tourism perspective. And for that, we need to think about how in a rural or regional context, mobility, infrastructure, connectivity, and governance are quite different, right? And this creates a lot of unique challenges for smart tourism development. There's also an input bias. And what I mean by that is that we focus on creating assets, creating these technologies as kind of inputs into the system, but we don't think enough about the process and how these inputs can translate into a process that leads to desired outcomes. And we haven't even thought about the outcomes either, right? So what are these desired outcomes? How do they connect to the sustainable development goals? There is also a tourism bias in most of the smart tourism literature, and you would probably say, well, rightly so. Yes, in some ways, but I think in tourism practice especially, we are missing out on some opportunities to create synergies with other industries and with a more global connection to also the residents at a destination. So if we're only focused on tourism, then this is not going to be a holistic, sustainable development paradigm. We have thought about this a little bit, and we have created this notion of the smart tourism city, where at least in an urban context, we can see how the smart city efforts and the smart destination efforts could merge to create a more holistic notion of smart development. There is also an inherent business bias in smart tourism, and that is because technology is mostly being developed by the tech industry. But what we need is smart destination governance, right? So it's not just that business layer. That business layer is important, but we also need governance. We need to think about who is going to be responsible to coordinate these smart tourism development efforts. And the DMOs are kind of the obvious players here, but the DMOs have been created mostly to serve industry in many parts of the world. In Asia, thank God, it's a little different. They have more of a governance political agenda. But we also need to think about, okay, what is a smart DMO that can actually drive a sustainable tourism agenda forward in connection with smart technology? And last but not least, I think there's a first world bias in that many of the concepts that we're talking about when we talk about smart tourism have really been developed in and for developed countries, and the goals as well as the processes that we have might not match the needs of developing countries. So in order to make this smart tourism a sustainable development paradigm, there's two questions we need to ask up front, and that is smart tourism for whom, and smart tourism for what purpose? And without having clear answers to these questions, we cannot really have sustainable smart tourism development. And I think the sustainable development goals are instrumental in guiding us in finding answers to these questions. So what is the role of technology then in this? Smart tourism technology is about creating efficiencies. It is about allowing monitoring. It is about accountability, traceability. It is also about connectivity, and connectivity not only in the sense of connecting technologies and people, or connecting people and people, but also connecting technology and connecting technology with that physical infrastructure. So connectivity happens in many ways in smart tourism. And the smart tourism technology is also there as an extension of reality and of human capabilities. This is also where the metaverse is now coming in, where technology, smart tourism technology allows us to see different things. So both from an end user, from a business, as well as from a governance perspective, technology has these roles in smart tourism. Now, what are the concerns? If you think about smart tourism technology, if we implement a smart tourism system, a technological system in this way, it also creates dependencies on the technology, dependencies on the companies that provide the technology, dependencies on the governments that regulate the technology. And with dependencies comes vulnerability, right? So that is a big issue, whether it's hacking, whether it's technology failure, a lot of vulnerability. Another issue is surveillance. There's a lot of data moving around in the smart tourism system. So who gets to see and use that data for what purposes? Energy use. We talk about smart tourism helping us conserve energy, but what about all this technology that is using up energy, all the server farms that we need to create virtual reality, right? But then also all the resources that we need to create the hardware of technology and the e-waste that comes from that. Also, the digital divides. So smart tourism so far has assumed, right, that everyone has access to technology, but that's not necessarily the case. And especially in a developing country context, we need to think about digital divides. But overall, we have to consider this because there's still divides across urban and rural, young and old, and so on, poor and wealthy. Technology can also create dependencies in terms of us losing our skills. We never talk about the health concerns of technology. If you use your phone too much, if you expose yourself to different kinds of forms of technology. And then there's the social concerns. What happens? Can we still connect with each other in natural ways? Can we connect to the people at the destination if we are so immersed in our virtual worlds and enhanced experiences? So what we really need to think about with this sustainable smart tourism development paradigm is ethical and just smart tourism development. So with Tassim Jamal, I have kind of created a short list of some of the things that we need to think about. For example, accountability for and regulation of local global virtual spaces, right? Special care with respect to technology design, thinking about privacy and algorithmic discrimination. Awareness of these new levels of dependencies, identification, monitoring, coordination, and distribution of wealth, right? As well as responsibility among these stakeholders in a smart tourism system, and consideration of the typically invisible environmental, social, and health consequences of technology use at the destination as well as elsewhere, because that technology use then is not going to stay at the destination. So to wrap this up, and I'm really hoping we can have a discussion about this, we need to move beyond thinking in terms of business-driven development and end-user applications in smart tourism. We need to think beyond the urban and first world contexts. We need a more critical perspective on smart tourism. We need to address the ethics and justice issues that stem from technology development and use. And last but not least, we need to better connect the smart tourism agenda with the smart development goals. So thank you very much. I hope that gave you a lot to think about, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Prof. Ulrike Gretzel, for the insightful presentation. We will have our Q&A towards the end of this session. We move on to our next presentation now, next presenter now. Our next speaker is Professor Dr. Peter O'Connor. Dr. Peter O'Connor is Professor of Strategic Management and Co-Director of the Center for Enterprise Dynamics and Global Economies at University of South Australia Business School. His primary research, teaching and consulting interests focus on the technology in online retailing and marketing. In addition to authoring 2 leading textbooks, Professor Peter has published research-based articles in leading academic journals, including the Journal of Marketing, Harvard Business Review, Journal of Retailing and Consumer Services, Tourism Management, the Cornell Quarterly, and the International Journal of Hospitality Management, amongst others. Prior to joining the Uni-SA, Prof. Peter founded the Chair in Digital Disruption, sponsored by BNP Paribas at ESSEC Business School in Paris, France. He taught and held a number of senior administrative positions at ESSEC for over 25 years, serving as both Director of MBA programs and Dean of Academic Programs at various stages. In addition, He has regularly taught executive education seminars at London Business School, held visiting positions at both the Johnson Graduate Business School and the School of Hotel Administration at Cornell University, as well as worked in a variety of positions in industry in both Europe and the USA. In 2015, he launched Essex's first MOOC on hotel distribution with Coursera, which currently has over 15,000 active learners. Professor Peter is regularly quoted by the international press and consulted by investment companies and private equity firms on development in the online marketplace. In addition to his duties at UniSA, Prof. Peter also works with internet analyst firm Focusrite as a senior analyst. In this capacity, he has worked with a large variety of leading travel companies across the globe, helping shape their distribution and online marketing strategies. Prof. Peter is not today with us, but he has shared his pre-recorded session, which we will be playing shortly for all of you to listen.
Good morning, everybody. Greetings from Adelaide in Australia. My name is Peter O'Connor. I'm a professor at the University of South Australia Business School, and I'm very glad to be here with you this morning. In this session, I would like to share some of the insights from an ongoing research project that I'm working on at the moment, talking about smart tourism, challenges, and solutions. During the course of the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the study, the methodology I'm using, some of the initial findings and so on, and I would invite you to contact me if you have any follow-up or questions or comments that you'd like to make. Let's start with something very, very simple, which I'm not going to spend much time on because obviously it's being dealt with already, particularly in Professor Uli's presentation. But what exactly do we mean by smart tourism? Now, for me, smart tourism is all about digital platforms that collect and exchange useful information, allowing travelers, suppliers, and other stakeholders to utilize this data in real time to enhance the travel experience for the consumer, as well as increase operational efficiency for suppliers, destination management organizations, governments, or any other stakeholders that may be involved in running the destination. Now, I think most people will agree that smart tourism is based on digital technology. But in order to make it work, it needs to go beyond simply the automation of operational processes. And what we need to try and do is we need to try and increase cooperation between the different stakeholders in order to enhance the competitiveness of the destination as a whole and to better manage our resources in a sustainable manner for the benefit of the destination. Now, why is this important? Well, irrespective of which stakeholder within tourism that you consider, by making use of smart tourism and by acting collectively rather than individually, it brings a host of different advantages. If we take the example of, just for example, tourism suppliers there at the end, at the center of my slide, excuse me, by having a deeper understanding of the customer based not just on firm level knowledge, but on the collective wisdom of the entire ecosystem and the availability of reliable, accurate, real-time data, well, the supplier can more precisely target customers from both a sales and marketing and an operational perspective, facilitating less wastage and providing better customer service through personalized services. Similarly, if we look at the destination level, smart tourism helps destination management organizations to better understand the needs and the business practices of the stakeholders within the destination, maybe perhaps as well to understand the success factors of participating organizations, which then helps the destination management organization to design appropriate policies to support businesses, while at the same time optimizing shared tourism resources and balancing the needs of the community against those of suppliers and visitors, and helping to better manage the destination as a whole by matching supply and demand, avoiding overuse of certain assets, by doing better marketing and using its expenditure more efficiently, and enhancing the overall tourism experience. And of course, consumers definitely benefit from smart tourism because they get an enhanced and more personalized tourism experience, which hopefully leads to increased satisfaction and increased loyalty to the destination. So when you look at it from a theoretical perspective, smart tourism brings advantages to everybody, which is great. Now, this is nothing new. I'm not telling you anything new here. Many researchers, including Professor Uli, have been talking about the potential of smart tourism for at least a decade, maybe even decades at this stage. Then, you know, the challenge for me seems to be, when we look at this objectively, there seems to be a massive difference between the theory and the reality. With all of the benefits that are being promised by smart tourism, why are there so few, if any, concrete examples of the successful implementation of smart tourism concepts, and why are very few of these potential benefits actually being achieved? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm sure there are lots and lots of destinations, cities, and so on out there trying their best to make smart tourism a reality. But this kind of difference between what we were promised and what seems to be actually happening, it really stoked my curiosity as to why such a powerful idea with such clear benefits for everybody involved seems to be, for want of a better word, stalled. So that brings me to the motivation for this study that I'm engaged in at the moment. What I'm trying to work on right now is to help identify why, when we have such a great concept with so many advantages to so many different stakeholders within tourism, why exactly we cannot seem to bring this to a more generalist fruition. In other words, what I would like to do is identify the barriers to smart tourism implementation and try to identify why we are actually stalled. However, I don't think this alone is enough. As we will see, some of the barriers identified are highly challenging and act as a significant brake on progress. So in order to advance the concept further, I also want to try and assess the feasibility and the timescale under which these challenges may be overcome. Now, this quote, it's been attributed to many, many different people, I think. Prediction is difficult, especially about the future. Niels Bohr, it was a Danish physicist, or I think was one of the first people to come up with this idea. And that's the challenge we have. When you want to look at the future, it's very, very difficult to actually come up with a reliable way of doing it. The study, it's exploratory, and as I said, is looking towards the future. So that suggests using a qualitative research approach, and in particular, the use of the Delphi method, which has been shown over the past number of decades to be quite effective, highly effective, I don't know what the right phrase there is, at assessing what's likely to happen in the future and the timelines under which that might actually happen. So the Delphi technique is quite simple at a very, very basic level. It involves the researcher soliciting the opinion of a group of experts on the subject at hand, soliciting their opinion, analyzing their feedback, collating it, trying to identify the common ground and iteratively feeding it back to them for comment until consensus is reached. Now, you can't just start this from nothing. You have to have some sort of a baseline. So I started this baseline using the existing literature. I did an extensive literature search on the Web of Science, which is one of the quality databases containing literature on business, computer science, and all sorts of different domains. This was supplemented with conference papers from the Information Communication Technologies and Tourism proceedings, which were also included because of their importance in this domain of digital tourism. And then the resulting pool of papers was then filtered down using their titles and abstracts to identify a pool of literature that could be scanned to identify previously identified barriers. So looking at it at a macro level, looking at this literature identified 7 main challenges. Now I'm going to talk about each one individually afterwards, but just very, very briefly, there's the availability of the technology to actually make this thing work. There's the fact that many tourism stakeholders are poor users of information and communications technologies, which could be a big challenge to making the idea work. There's the massive issue of sharing data and data interoperability. There's the question of who develops the system and runs the system, and linked to that very, very closely is the issue of funding. So those are 5 issues which I think go together, but there are also 2 bigger issues which come from business in general, and that's the issue of privacy and consumers' desire to have more control over what's being done with their data and who has access to it. And then there's also the question of data ownership. And again, this links on a more strategic level back to the issue of sharing data, but from a management perspective rather than from a technical perspective. So let's look at the first one of these, the availability of technology. So as I mentioned at the very outset, most people would agree that smart tourism is based on technology. And in order to make it work, you need to have an extensive network of both suppliers using technology, as well as Internet of Things and other devices collecting data about consumers, about businesses, which are then stored on massive cloud-based databases, analyzed using machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms in order to arrive at insights that can be fed back to the various stakeholders using the smart tourism system. And one of the big questions that comes up in much of the literature is whether the underlying technologies right now are ready or not. Now, linked to this, you have the issue that many stakeholders within the tourism ecosystem have traditionally been slow to innovate and to adopt information and communication technologies. This may be, of course, because many of them are small and medium-sized enterprises, and as a result, they typically lack the resources and the expertise to be able to successfully exploit information and communication technologies. At a higher level, they may not even be aware of the benefits that ICTs can actually bring. Now, the good news here is this challenge has been, to a certain extent, mitigated by COVID-19. And one of the effects of COVID-19 has been that many businesses that were previously resisting digitization have been forced by COVID-19 to become much more digital. I would point out as well here, though, that this is demand rather than supply driven. The impetus for this digitization is being driven not by the businesses themselves, but by the consumers who are insisting that in order to actually transact with them, they have to be digitally enabled. A third factor is the lack of interoperability between the various systems being used in the tourism sector. Now, research has shown that there are many typically transaction processing level systems in use throughout the sector, but for the most part, these operate as islands of automation using proprietary data formats and operating in closed data networks. Even within specific stakeholder segments, like for example, car rental or hotel or attractions, there's little agreement between different players as to what data should be stored, in what format, in what standard, making it extremely difficult to collate such data across multiple organizations. And then, of course, for smart tourism to succeed, you need to share this data, collect this data and share this data, not just across one type of stakeholder, but across all different types of stakeholders within the actual destination, creating a kind of what I call a data spaghetti challenge. And, you know, even if these technological and usage challenges are overcome, there still remains the question of how smart tourism ecosystems will be developed. Every destination is different in terms of customers, suppliers, needs, priorities, and much, much more. Given this individuality and complexity, it looks likely that smart tourism systems will have to be developed in a bespoke manner, taking into account the peculiarities of each situation and destination. These are massive IT projects, which begs the question as to who would be capable of undertaking such development and managing the systems afterwards. And of course, the related point, which I'll talk about immediately afterwards, funding the development of these systems. Experience to date seems to point towards public leadership, often in the form of some sort of a public-private partnership. But this is increasingly seen as a challenge in many parts of the world where tourism organizations or destination management companies are squeezed for resources and potentially do not have the capacity to engage in such efforts. And then taking capacity apart and looking at the question of costs and funding, for smart tourism to work successfully, it requires the development and operation of some form of centralized service to make everything work. And by definition, there's a capital cost involved in the development of this infrastructure, as well as an ongoing operational cost to keep it functioning. As with all centralized services, the big question is how to both initially fund this development and then continually to fund operations, particularly when the benefits are difficult to quantify and typically flow to the destination as a whole rather than the individual firm level. On a more strategic level, you start thinking about the privacy issue. In many parts of the world, consumers are increasingly concerned about who has access to their personal data and how it's actually being used. And in reaction to this, many governments have introduced regulations which limit what businesses can do, in particular with personal data, and this may act as a significant challenge for getting smart tourism to work effectively. And related to this is the question of data ownership. With its philosophy of the sum being greater than the mere addition of its parts, smart tourism implies the sharing of what many would consider to be commercially sensitive information with both partners, but more importantly, with competitors. And this open innovation type of approach can be problematic for some stakeholders who prefer to who would prefer to grow their slice to the detriment of other, rather than focusing on growing the size of the pie as a whole. So as I said, here you can see the 7 major challenges which were identified from the literature. Now, just identifying the challenges is not enough. On top of that, what we want to do is we want to actually establish a baseline for when these challenges might be overcome. So, initial timelines shown here were developed from the literature as well as from reports on mega companies such as the Gartner Group, to start the conversation with the experts in the Delphi study. And shown here is the initial proposal from anticipated short-term challenges to those that will take much longer to overcome. And as you can see here, I've broken them down into two different groups, what I've called operational issues and strategic challenges or strategic issues below the line there. In terms of the operational issues, well, the good news is these seem to be less of an issue than some of the other problems we've identified. In terms of the availability of technology, many of the technologies necessary to underpin smart tourism are currently available or are at advanced stages of development, and as a result can be integrated or could be integrated into smart tourism systems. In terms of systems development, the cost of developing systems is coming down. And as a result, it looks more likely that such systems and these technologies could be integrated together to develop some sort of a smart tourism platform. Interoperability will maybe take a little bit longer to address. We do have many open APIs being used by larger companies. The challenge here, of course, is the islands of automation problem that I talked about earlier on, with these many different proprietary systems being used by the different stakeholders within tourism, with few data standards which would allow the data to be easily shared. On a more strategic level, you have what I would call policy items, which I think will take a lot longer to actually address. ICT use by stakeholders, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises. This is a problem we've had for decades. It's starting to be addressed, but it's still going to take quite a long time to actually overcome. And then you have the bigger issues of data privacy and data ownership, which are much, much more complex. They're not technological, they are managerial and policy related. And as a result, it will take some time to actually try to develop solutions that will overcome these challenges. So overall, I think smart tourism still has potential. Progress is gradually being made. It's slow. It's probably not as fast as anybody would like. The key questions for me then become, what are the priorities and how can we short circuit this process in order to try to accelerate progress, and also to try to identify some of the creative solutions to some of the challenges that we've identified in order to make smart tourism our reality for more destinations. The Delphi study is continuing. First results are expected in early 2023. Hopefully, I'll be able to share the results of them with you on another occasion. In the meantime, if you have any comments or observations, please feel free to reach out to me. My contact details are shown there on the bottom right-hand side of the slide. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of this very interesting summer school.
Thank you very much, Prof. Peter, for this vibrant presentation. Hopefully, we can hear to you we can listen to you live next time. The last speaker for this session is Professor Dr. Juho Pesonen. Professor Dr. Juho Pesonen is a professor of tourism businesses and deputy head of the department at University of Eastern Finland Business School. He is a member of the Tourism Business Research Group and the director of the International Master's Degree Program in Tourism Marketing and Management. Professor Pesonen completed his PhD in marketing at University of Eastern Finland, focusing on market segmentation in rural tourism. Now his research focuses on understanding how tourism businesses can survive and thrive in the digital and sustainability transformations. Prof. Pesonen also has the title of Adjunct Professor of Digital Marketing at University of Turku. He is the president of the International Federation for Information Technology in Travel and Tourism, among other board positions. He has widely published his research in dozens of peer-reviewed academic journals and has edited several books in the tourism field. With this, I pass the floor to Prof. Pesonen. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here. It's a pleasure seeing so many of you here. Fantastic, and thank you all for joining this session. And I really enjoyed the previous presentations because they were like a direct connection to what we are doing in Finland at this moment. So instead of just studying and teaching smart tourism and tourism business, I also work and collaborate closely with several destinations and businesses in Finland who are actually doing this smart tourism development. And I can completely agree with Peter and Uli on these issues that have been raised here. But slowly we are starting to see some progress, and it's opening fantastic new opportunities for destinations, businesses, and sustainable development. This is what I'm going to be talking about in this presentation. And especially because I come from the marketing field, we are in Finland getting into a situation slowly where we start to have the data that smart tourism needs, but it's still destinations and businesses don't have the capabilities to understand what to do with that data. And for that purpose, I'm approaching this sustainable development from marketing perspective. And in marketing, we have a concept of growth hacking, which means basically that we utilize the possibilities of technology in order to find easy victories and efficient ways of operating in the marketing field. And many of those principles, in my opinion, can be also utilized for sustainable tourism. And this is what I'm going to be presenting today. So I'm theoretically looking at this topic from knowledge management, smart tourism, growth hacking perspective, and putting them all together in this presentation based on my own experiences and the research that we are doing at University of Eastern Finland and in Finland in general. So looking at smart tourism and innovations, there's a lot of things going on in Finland, and I would say the Finnish destinations and businesses as well are taking these sustainability and technology issues very seriously. And Visit Finland has launched many interesting initiatives: Sustainable Travel Finland, certification for businesses, smart tourism, Visit Finland Data Hub, and many others that is coordinating both smart tourism as well as sustainable tourism development in Finland. But in these regards, with this process that's been ongoing for years, there have been some big questions coming up that we now need to answer. For example, that how good are we in sustainable development? Are we actually making a change, doing things that have an effect? How do we know that we are doing the right things? How do we know how big our negative impacts and positive impacts are? What are the reasons why our negative impacts are this much, and what are the reasons why positive impacts are this much? How do we calculate them? How do we measure them? How do we know if we are going into the right direction? And all of these questions actually require some kind of evidence, you know, that we have knowledge that we are actually can answer these questions with some kind of validity and reliability. And of course, that knowledge comes from data, and data indeed is the cornerstone of smart tourism, as we've seen here in many cases. There's a lot of data in smart tourism, and as Peter pointed out, that's also a huge issue for smart tourism development, because we have all kinds of data, but it's very difficult and very expensive to get them into the same system that would allow simultaneous analysis of different aspects of what we are interested in. but we are slowly getting there. And I think this is based on ideas of Uli and colleagues on the smart tourism and how data is behind all of that. And if we really want to have smart tourism destinations, we cannot do that without having access to collecting data, exchanging, processing data that then creates these smart tourism destinations. And for example, Helsinki has been, with Visit Finland, really active in this smart destination development. They've been chosen as the European capital for smart tourism and many other aspects that they are also seeing that actually smart tourism is doing good things for them. It is directing their investment decisions, it's directing their recruitment decisions and many other things that are becoming a reality, becoming a practice in smart tourism. Data from my perspective is connected to knowledge management. So it's not just that organizations collect and process and use data, but especially how we do that is about building these organizational capabilities, building these knowledge management based organizations. There's wide literature on this issue, that how do we build an organization that is able to utilize data in an efficient way. It's definitely a skill. It requires knowledge how to do things with data, what to do with it, how do all that process works, to creating data from different sources, bringing them together and analyzing it in a meaningful way. And if we don't have a culture that embraces learning, sharing, changing and improving, it's not going to work. So I think this is an issue for many corporations, destinations, that this is a new kind of way of operating, new kind of way of doing business, new kind of way of investing in different parts of tourism development that is required. And it's something that capabilities that need to be developed. But it definitely can be a source of competitive advantage, but it also could be a tool for sustainability. And increasingly, sustainability is connected to data. And for managing sustainability, we need to be able to have this knowledge management capabilities in organizations. If we look at sustainable development goals, for example, there have been developed different kind of measurements. All of these sustainable development goals, for example, in SDG tracker, have certain kind of measurements that we know how different countries, for example, are progressing on different aspects of SDGs. In tourism research, Uli mentioned quadruple bottom line, triple bottom line. They are basically the same thing, and well, in different kind of categorization. But the idea here is nonetheless that we have to have all these aspects on a similar line. So I would argue that very often we put a lot of emphasis on the economic sustainability or profit portion of the triple bottom line. But lately, we are starting to have capabilities to pay attention to more aspects than just the profits. But just collecting and measuring these things is just the starting point. The question is that what happens after that? That let's say we start getting this data, what do we do with all that data? And this is the point where I'm seeing that many tourism organizations are in smart tourism now stopping that. I'm working with startups and destinations, and we start to get really good data, but the next step is missing. The destinations don't know what to do, how to operate with all that data, how to make daily decisions. And for that, I suggest that the growth hacking concept from marketing, and especially from digital marketing, could be really useful also for finding ways how to use all that data that we have. Basically, growth hacking links marketing and information communication technologies, as well as artificial intelligence, social media, to, let's say, it's not just increasing profits and finding the best ways to do marketing, but it's also a mindset of lean philosophy, meaning that we do the right things in the right way. We test things, we figure out what works, what doesn't work, and we learn about our progress. We learn about, we build these learning organizations. And I think that general idea and undertone behind growth hacking can definitely be applied for sustainable tourism development. In growth hacking, we have basically developed a collection of tools and methods and means in different parts of the customer life cycle, where we can hack these parts in order to increase the profits for the organization, or even sometimes increase customer satisfaction. But in similar ways, maybe we can change the ideas a little bit, that instead of choosing just profits as the key performance indicators that we want to hack, we could look at SDGs and different dimensions of sustainable development goals. Maybe we can start setting up new KPIs that we want to hack. And if those come from different aspects of sustainability, I think that creates new kind of ways how we can think developing sustainability. The issue is that in this field, growth hacking sustainable tourism, we don't have these tools. We don't have this collection of methods and that we could use at this moment to find ways how we take different aspects of sustainability rapidly forward. But the process is nonetheless quite clear, and something that for sure helps companies that now have access to data but don't know what to do with it. If we want to hack the SDGs, not all companies can do everything. So I would suggest that destinations and businesses maybe focus on certain kind of aspects of sustainability and set a goal for our key performance indicator or a set of KPIs, depending on their own strategies and maybe even the customer segments, local communities, what is important for them, and so on. Then, of course, analyzing the existing situation. Where are we now? What kind of data we have? What kind of data we can analyze and collect and build, and what is the situation with these set KPIs at this moment? Then we have to be able to hypothesize solutions. What should improve the situation regarding the KPIs we have set? Why that should improve the solution, and how much? What's our initial understanding of this? What are the costs and benefits of different solutions? So that's basically the idea behind growth hacking, that we find the ideas that have the most positive impact with the least costs. And then we test if our hypothesis works, if the solution works. We make a change that should develop, that should improve the situation, and we measure the changes. And then it goes back to analyzing the existing situation. How did we do? Was that the right way to go? Should we try something else? And if you look at this, you might actually find similarities with academic research. And I find this thinking like a scientist, something that destinations and businesses need increasingly to have in order to start utilizing the data that they might have access to and want to build access to. And let's take a practical example from a startup that I'm working with. That there is a tourism destination that wants to increase income from tourists to the destination in relation to CO2 emissions from transport that is required to bring people to the destination. Let's say the destination itself can be pretty much carbon neutral, but at this moment, a lot of emissions come from transportation. So we started being in a situation where we can, in real time, measure the economic impacts of tourism while also understanding the CO2 impact of travel. And a destination might set a goal for themselves that we want to have the current tourism revenue in the destination at this current level. We're happy with it, but the next step would be to reduce the CO2 emissions by 10%. How do we do that? They might hypothesize that, well, they're collecting data, of course, about tourism carbon footprint in relation to tourist spending patterns. They understand that there's different kind of market segments based on travel motivations, for example, in the destination. And they create a hypothesis, excuse me, that based on their data, they see that family tourists from Helsinki have the highest euro per CO2 ratio among all tourist segments. And if we target marketing for this segment, it should result in us gaining similar kind of income while reducing the CO2 impact of travel. And they do testing in the marketing campaigns and transfer budgets from other segments into this market segment. And then we have to monitor whether this KPI that we're interested in improves or not in the next few months, in the next year, and learn from that process. Did this help at all? If it didn't, then we try something else. But this is just one way of developing new measurements in smart tourism, as well as using the data that we have to develop marketing and thus the impacts of tourism. But the issue here is that why should companies invest in this kind of growth hacking for sustainability, whereas they could just focus on growth hacking for profits? So instead of optimizing euro per CO2 ratio, they could just optimize the euros in the destination because they have the data. Maybe we need a change of thinking, and for that, triple bottom line approach can be great, because if we are able to, let's say, assess all of the different aspects of SDGs in the same way and have the same kind of importance for them, then we might find ways to find easy victories in all areas of sustainability. But the thing is that we need to change the line of thinking and really start taking the sustainability seriously. And I'm really excited about this research that Dimitar, Fechner, and Dolnikar are doing, because this is definitely the case that they study that what do we understand about, let's say, changing people's behavior through experiments, because that's what growth hacking is, that we do experiments, preferably in real time with the data that we have. And their research shows that we actually don't know that much about how activities in businesses affect customer choices and sustainability dimensions. So we are pretty good at this moment to understand how do we optimize reuse of towels in tourism, and something about food waste, but that's basically it. All the other dimensions of growth hacking SDGs is still missing, and there's a lot of things that can be done and studied here. So I think the red here shows that there's just a lot of research to be conducted in the future. But it's not just academic research, but organizations with access to data and that have these data building capabilities can test and discover at faster rates. Many of the companies, if you're just able to collect the data, then you can start testing out what to do with this data. And I think that is what actually creates smartness and creates knowledge in destinations and businesses. For example, European Tourism Indicator System is a great initiative where we have developed measurements and ways to measure different aspects of sustainability, but we have to do that systematically. But now we are seeing that especially when we are able to combine data from different sources and connect that data with AI analytics, we can have completely new ways of understanding correlations and even causal relationships or create hypotheses, at least for experiments with the help of AI. it requires great data mining capabilities that I think tourism is still lacking. And the issue is that tourism is competing with all the other fields with this regard. And of course, all the issues with data that Peter already suggested and pointed out. But to conclude, I think that smart tourism is making the triple bottom line or quadruple bottom line, as Uli suggested, more relevant than ever. We have to be able to start measuring different aspects, and I think we start to have tools for that. But we also need new kind of organizational capabilities, active knowledge management, and organizations that are basing their actions on knowledge. We have a lot of people already in tourism field that are working with data, but they are not working with sustainability data that much. For example, revenue managers in hotels and hospitality companies would be fantastic people to get on board with sustainability initiatives. They have the capabilities and skills and understanding and mindset for this sustainability growth hacking. This also means that we have to take sustainability seriously. It's not just something we do on the side. It's a core aspect of tourism development. Everything a business does has an impact, and we now start to have capabilities to measure this impact, both positive and negative. It's about living this sustainable development on a daily basis, that it's like a core part of businesses and destinations. This can be also seen, for example, by how we create dashboards for destination and business management. What's the role and visibility of sustainability indicators in these dashboards? And this smart tourism brings definitely new kind of measurements for us to optimize new KPIs, but it also brings new management paradigm for sustainable development in tourism. It requires this kind of scientific mindset, researcher mindset in order to utilize that data. Growth hacking is typically in the literature very fast-paced. We experiment fast, fail fast, learn fast. In tourism, that's an issue because sometimes the booking periods, for example, can be 1 year. If we do marketing now, the results of marketing can happen in 1 or 2 years. So I think that's an issue in many ways for tourism, that maybe we cannot be that fast-paced as we want in sustainable development, but at least it still gives the mindset. Also, the issues of greenwashing, I think, are very relevant in tourism at this moment, and basically the best way to combat greenwashing is with data. So if you are able to transparently demonstrate what you are doing, everybody gets the understanding, and your sustainable initiatives are actually online and based on actual data. Of course, with all this, the major issue is that not all valuable can be measured. For example, how civilized the society is very difficult to measure and optimize and build KPIs. So I think this is a big way of research, that how do we develop these KPIs in valid and reliable way. We definitely need scientists for that. And the bottom line is nonetheless that growth hacking is kind of like a mindset as much as a collection of tools and methods. And this is bringing digital technologies in the forefront in sustainable development in many ways, that all these measurements allow us to do really new and useful things to optimize sustainable development. Thank you all for listening. I'm looking forward for discussion. Please contact me, network with me if you have any questions. And if you're interested in learning more about smart tourism, I would suggest you to put Enter 23 eTourism conference in your calendars. The paper submission is still open for a while now, and this is definitely something that we will be continuing from at this IFIT conference. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Prof. Juho, for very informative presentation. Certainly, digital technology plays a major role in sustainable development. We will now have the questions and answer sessions. So I have a few questions here with me. Those who are yet to put their questions, you can use the Slido, scan the QR code and share your questions with us. So my first question goes to Prof. Ulrike. It is, given the rise of smart health monitoring apps, do you think the COVID pandemic has exposed people to data safety and privacy concerns? Prof. Dr. Uli?
Yes, I think there have been a lot of issues connected to the pandemic because it required very fast solutions. So speaking of growth hacking, a lot of that meant that privacy concerns had to kind of be put to the side a little bit, and also, of course, we know the technology is emerging, and there's always updates, right? And you have to fix the bugs and all that. And so if we have digital development that happens as fast as it did during the pandemic, and then we also have a lot of negative economic consequences, when we have, and also political tumult around the world, we have people who are motivated to exploit technological vulnerabilities. So yes, I think some of these tools have exposed people to additional risks. I know that in the context of Australia, for example, the tracking app for COVID was actually terminated. People were asked to not use it anymore because there were so many issues with that. So definitely in this context of smart tourism, we need to think about, yes, moving fast, doing the growth hacking, but not at the expense of moving forward safely.
Thank you very much, Prof. Ulrike. We have a question for Prof. Juho. Prof. Juho, the question is, how can tourism businesses survive and thrive in the digital and sustainability transformations?
Well, that's a pretty big question, but I would say that, like, I think COVID was really excellent in a way that some companies survived and some companies thrived and some companies didn't. And this is something that I've been thinking that, and something that I'm seeing in Finland at least, that companies that survived and thrived during the pandemic are also the ones that are really good at using technologies, that are really good at sustainable development. And I feel like that there is a company culture and mindset of this kind of like a learning organization that is enabling them to be constantly innovative. And somehow everything, in my opinion, comes down to that innovation capability in ever-changing world.
Thank you, Prof. Juho. The next question is for Prof. Ulrike. Is there a difference between smart tourism and smart destinations? What are the benefits of smart tourism for local communities?
Yeah, so smart tourism is the broader concept, and smart destinations is smart tourism applied to a destination context, which assumes that we can also apply smart tourism to other contexts. Yes, so I think there is a lot of opportunities for any kind of size of destination, but as I have said in my presentation, right now, a lot of the ideas and a lot of the concepts are being developed for urban destinations with a certain kind of infrastructure. I wouldn't necessarily say big, but if you think about the infrastructure investment that Peter was talking about, clearly smaller, not so wealthy destinations will have struggles with this. I think that smart destinations also as islands, for example, have been very successful. So the Spanish tourism organization has done a lot of work with some of the Spanish islands because it's a more
It seems Prof. Ulrike has lost the connection.
It seems so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Meanwhile, Prof. Juho, I have a question for you. In your opinion, how do you view the role of culture when adapting to smart technologies in tourism?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
In your opinion, how do you view the role of culture when adapting to smart technologies in tourism?
Yeah, in this case, I'm wondering, would culture mean the organizational culture, or national culture, or culture as, let's say, source of or as a type of tourism? But if we look at the thing that I'm interested in is of course organizational culture, and how we build an organizational culture that allows companies to stay innovative all the time, because that's where everything happens. And I think organizational culture is in a way responsibility of the management and owners of the company. That's what I'm seeing with many businesses, that managers show with their example what kind of organizational culture there is, and business owners, especially tourism is full of small and medium-sized businesses where the owners have a very major role in setting the tone for the company. So if we want to change an organizational culture towards the direction that allows it to be innovative and survive in these times, I would especially focus on the owners as well as the management in these regards.
Thank you very much, Prof. Juho. I believe Prof. Ulrike is back. I saw her joining again. Meanwhile, I have one question. This is not addressed to any specific speaker. Maybe Prof. Juho, if you can answer this question.
Yeah.
What is the fundamental advantage of smart tourism compared to the traditional tourism?
Well, what is traditional tourism like? How like smartness is a scale. I would say that we have tourism destinations and businesses that are not smart at all, and then we have businesses that are very, very smart. Somehow the biggest difference, I would say, it comes from the data. And I think that's what is special about smart tourism, is this data layer that differentiates it the most from e-tourism. Of course, all of these aspects of what happens because of that data, how we are able to understand the networks and ecosystems and all that, flows from the data dimension. So I would especially focus on the data side of smart tourism, which differentiates it from all the rest that has been before.
And I would add to that, I think a lot of what Juho said is also about resilience. That comes from the data, and that comes from the innovation capacity that you develop because of smart tourism. So this notion of being able to change fast and maybe adapt to different circumstances, that is central to smart tourism.
And it's weird that change is always unnatural for human beings. So that makes it a special kind of capability for organizations that are able to embrace this change and build these agile working and development methods for the businesses. And all of this is connected in my opinion.
Yeah, and in some ways, this is why smart tourism extends our human capabilities, and also maybe this monitoring and sensing capability helps us see things before they even happen, right? So we can anticipate change a lot better because of it. So of course, we are talking about technology, and my Zoom completely collapsed, and it was not my cat's fault for a change. So I don't know what happened and how much you heard me say, but if you need me to repeat something, let me know.
Thank you, Prof. Juho and Prof. Ulrike. I have a question here for Prof. Peter, who is not here, but if any one of you can take this question. The question is, problems related to data ownership and capital requirement imply that academic researchers can't do research with big data at destinations.
Can you repeat the last part, Aaron?
Problems related to data ownership and capital requirement imply that academic researchers can't do research with big data at destinations. This is the question.
This is an issue that I'm struggling with daily, and in many cases, businesses and destinations are able to create anonymized data sets for researchers. It takes time and resources to do that in many cases because they have not designed their data sets for that. So that's an issue, that where do we get that kind of resources? Sometimes you can do that with project funding, for example, but it's definitely an issue. We as researchers don't want personal data. We want to stay as far away from it as possible, whereas for companies, many of them are interested in using it, and of course all this, for example, Europe has GDPR regulations that set clear boundaries, what you can do with data and what you cannot do with data, and it's definitely an issue on this collaboration and research side.
And one thing that we haven't discussed is really the role of universities in this, and I think this question relates to that. And I think Juho, your presentation talked a lot about how we need to establish this science thinking and the KPIs from a more scientific point of view. And I think there's a huge role in education and in our programs to teach that better. And for whatever crazy reason, there's still a huge gap between theory and practice in tourism and industry and universities research, much more so than in the technology world, where Google and Stanford are working very closely together, right? So we have, I guess, an agenda here that we need to move forward, where I think we need to move maybe a little more towards the industry and the destination needs. But they also, I think, through that next generation of tourism managers that we are putting out, need to move closer to the universities, and we need to work together.
Yeah, many times in smart tourism research, these businesses are doing their own stuff, and they have their resources that we at universities can only dream about, and we are mostly reporting what the industry is doing in research. But in education now, for the first time in a very long time, I feel like that the capabilities and knowledge that we at the universities have is that kind of thing that industry still doesn't have. And I'm really enthusiastic about training the future generation of tourism experts, because I feel like there is much more need for the capabilities that we teach now than ever before. You're muted, sorry.
I'm very sorry. Thank you very much, Prof. Juho and Prof. Ulrike, for this wonderful discussion. We have questions keep coming in, but due to time limitations, we have to stop this Q&A session here. So before we end this session, please allow me to summarize this session. Prof. Ulrike highlighted the practice of planning and implementing tourism development. She also highlighted on employing technology to achieve SDGs for smart tourism development, and also the 4 pillars of smart tourism, which are accessibility, sustainability, digitalization, and cultural heritage. She also talked about smart tourism governance. Prof. Peter, in his presentation, shared the barriers that remain for smart tourism implementation. Prof. Peter also discussed the use of ICT by tourism stakeholders, especially the SMEs. And during in the last presentation, Prof. Juho focused on data-based smart tourism management and how the marketing concepts can be utilized for increasing sustainability in tourism businesses and destinations. So with this, we had 3 wonderful presentations in this session, and we have to come to the end of this session. We will have a group picture now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anshul. Before we take the group picture,